Today on The Big Story, $29 million will be spent on upgrading 10 flats in Singapore, 10 private estates. Should doctors who commit acts of dishonesty be allowed to continue the practice? Join the debate. And finally, grabbing live crabs from a claw machine. Is it animal cruelty? Hello and welcome to The Big Story, where we talk about the hottest topics of today right in the heart of the newsroom. I'm Kimberly Jiao, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. 10 private estates in Singapore will be undergoing upgrading that will cost $29 million in total. This is part of the Estate Upgrading Program, or EUP, which develops and upgrades infrastructure in aging private estates. More than 7,000 households will benefit from the improved facilities, including providing footpath lighting, installing wheelchair-accessible ramps, and improving the estate's landscaping and parks. Minister for National Development Lawrence Wong announced that more than $1 billion will be spent over the next few years for upgrading. Excluding today's announcement, so far about $187 million has been spent on upgrading 63 private estates. With us today is ST journalist Michelle Ng. Hi Michelle. So how does this benefit the residents there?
EUP, this whole estate program, estate upgrading program, is for private estates. So these areas are mainly like condos and landed houses, but not everyone who lives like in a landed or condo are well off. So for example, in Westwood and Frankel, there are a lot of like older retirees, like older folks who just live at home, and the benefits for them would be like like having like better footpath lighting, installing like wheelchair accessible ramps, and improving the landscape of like the entire estate. So actually all these things, all these facilities are public. They are public facilities, right? So there are things like sidewalks, drains, playgrounds, the pathway that leads to your bus stop or to the school, and residents there don't actually have to pay for all this. So it's all done by the government.
Right.
Yeah.
And you actually went down earlier today, right, to speak to them. So how did they feel about this?
This afternoon I went. I spoke to a couple of residents in Mei Hwan, which is in the Aljunied GRC. I think most of them, they welcome the upgrading, because I mean, who doesn't like to live in a nicer space? Right. Yeah. So in particularly in regards to like the covering of open drains, because residents there they told me that there are quite a number of children, like young kids who runs around like in the area. So like open drains sometimes might like have some safety issues for that. And also within Mei Hwan estate, there's also a playground that's right beside a condo. So like a lot of like kids from like the condo and within the landed house area, they in the evening, like 5-6 o'clock, they will just go there to chill and have fun with your family. And so they want to see like more exciting stuff for like their children to play in lah.
I see. Just upgrade and refresh the things.
Yeah, refresh the things so that it can be a space for like the young and the old to like hang out together. Because there's also like a fitness corner in that area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a really nice space.
Right. So why are these private estates part of the EUP?
So the Ministry of National Development, MND, right, has this EUP specially for private estates because MND has there's like. Earlier this month, Minister Lawrence Wong has announced that the government is setting aside more than $1 billion to upgrade both private and public housing estates. So for HDBs, right, they have things like home improvement programs, for all these older housing boards and estates lah. But whereas for private estates, sometimes because they are not considered as part of like the town, they don't have access to all this town council stuff. So so EUP is to help this private estate develop and upgrade all these like facilities that's in their area. I see, because
they're not eligible for grants and stuff like that.
No,
right?
yeah, so they get left out. So they sort of like get left out of like upgrading programs because they don't have access to town council or like housing board grants basically.
I see. So this EUP is sort of specifically for them,
just so that they can upgrade their area as well.
I see. So if you'd like to see the full story, do head on to our website, that's straitstimes.com. Thanks for sharing more with us, Michelle. Our next story. Should dishonest doctors be struck off the register and be barred from practicing medicine? In an opinion piece written by ST Senior Health correspondent Salma Khalik today, she said the answer is not so simple. Let's look at some numbers first. Between 2008 and 2017, the Singapore Medical Council held 126 disciplinary cases against doctors, and 3 doctors were struck off the register. More specifically, 2 dentists have been charged with cheating the government through the Community Health Assist Scheme. And more are expected as 17 medical and dental clinics have been taken off the subsidy scheme by the Health Ministry for possible fraud. Chief Justice Sundaresh Menon pointed out that the Medical Disciplinary Tribunal seemed more relaxed about dishonesty than the Law Society of Singapore. He said, "There are many examples of cases where doctors have received terms of suspension for acts of dishonesty which, if committed by lawyers, would almost certainly have warranted the sanction of a striking off." Salma Khalid is here with me right now to share more with us. Hi Salma.
Hi Kimberly.
So do you think with this issue, right, should the doctors and lawyers be held to the same standard?
Actually, there are certain basic moral issues that I think everybody should be held to certain standards. But here we are talking about punishment. Should doctors and lawyers be punished equally for the same misdemeanor? And I think, for example, doctors, to me, harm to a patient is more serious than just pure dishonesty. I guess in the legal profession it's different because their lawyers are actually members of the court. They represent law and order. So for them, dishonesty is very important. But if you look at normal court cases, right? So there are different levels of dishonesty. You've got somebody who maybe stole a toothpaste from a supermarket. You know, he's not going to be jailed for 10 years. So even in normal circumstances, dishonesty has different grades.
Correct.
And to me, I think where doctors are concerned, there should also be different grades.
I see.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be sort of a blanket at all.
Not the same dishonesty rule that that lawyers have. Although to a large extent, I think dishonesty is a very serious offence.
So if you were to go a little bit wider, right? You posed a question actually at the end of your piece, which is that you asked if there's no risk to the public, should their punishments be lighter? What is your personal opinion?
Well, like I said earlier, I think there's a whole range, right? And to me, the most important thing where doctors are concerned is harm to patients. Anything that affects harm to patients, I think the SMC should land on them very severely. Anything that's less than that, well, it depends on the circumstances, on the individual case. You can't have a blanket, when it comes to punishments, there's always a range.
Right.
And I think we should use that range.
So do you have any examples for any forgivable offences? What would you say?
Okay, of the examples that the CJ brought up of dishonesty, there was one case of a young doctor, a houseman, who was shoplifting. A similar case with a lawyer who shoplifted. The lawyer was struck off. The houseman was merely censured. Now, censuring might have been too light, right?
Okay.
But I do not think the doctor needs to be struck off. He said he was under a lot of stress at that time, and hopefully being hauled up before a tribunal will teach him a lesson, and that in future he would behave himself.
I see. So, with this issue, tell us why this is so important.
It's largely timing.
Okay.
Because right now the SMC has got a committee to look into the various punishments for disciplinary tribunals.
Okay.
In the past they didn't. So each tribunal will look at previous cases and then decide on their own. So you get huge discrepancies. Some judges are more strict, other tribunals are more lenient. So now they're coming up with a list. If it's this type of problem, this is the sort of punishment that should go with it.
Okay.
So while they're coming up with the guidelines, I think this is a time that these issues should be raised, especially amongst the medical professionals, but also members of the public, because we are patients and we depend on doctors.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's really surprising that they didn't have one before.
I think it's just historical.
Okay.
In the past, they didn't have so many cases, right? And as more and more cases come, I think you really need to have it set up properly.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing more with us, Salma. To read the full opinion piece, do head on to straitstimes.com, and you can also join in the conversation in the comments below. So, seafood restaurant in Punggol has become the talk of the town. It came under fire for allowing customers to catch their own live crabs using a claw machine. House of Seafood introduced the gimmick earlier this month. For $5 a go, you get to snap up the Sri Lankan crab, and if successful, the restaurant will cook it for free. As far as we know, only one person has been successful. In an effort to claw back the public backlash against it, the restaurant said on Facebook that it has stopped using the machine temporarily. This came a day after it was called out by the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or SPCA, as being cruel to the crabs. We've invited SPCA Executive Director Jaipal Singh Gill, hello, on our show to tell us more. And I understand you have an exclusive for us.
Yes, well, unfortunately, last night we received another case very similar to the first one. This one is in Jurong. It's a lobster claw machine.
Ooh.
So it's a bit disappointing to hear that. This
dear.
machine has supposedly been in existence for a few months.
Okay.
So we have gone down, we have already investigated the case, and we're putting up a report to the authorities, and we're hoping that swift action can be taken
Oh dear.
for this case as well.
So this is also a seafood restaurant?
Yes, it's also a seafood restaurant.
Oh my gosh. Well, on the heels of that, you guys actually released a statement about the crab thing that story that we're talking about today, and you released a statement on Tuesday. So actually, how did this come to your attention?
So the case was brought to our attention by a member of the public.
Okay.
Actually, almost every issue the SPCA looks into, a case that we deal with, comes from a complaint or report from a member of the public. So we are very grateful to the community. You know, they are our eyes and ears on the ground. So that's how the complaint came in. And when I first received the complaint, I had to do a quick check for the date, because I was just wondering if this was the 1st of April. That was how surprising it was that in this day and age in Singapore, someone would come up with this concept.
Oh.
Unfortunately, it was real, and
Oh dear.
we are where we are now.
You guys thought it was a joke initially.
I did for a second. I mean, sometimes you just wonder that, you know, could this actually be something that
Right.
someone came up with again in this day and age?
Right.
It was a bit surprising.
And it does sound, a little bit absurd, right?
It does, yes.
But there have been people sort of debating that this is no more cruel than a live seafood restaurant where people grab the crabs in front of you and cook them in front of you. Is this quite the same?
No, I mean, there are differences. So I think 2 points I'll bring up here. The first is that there are differences. I mean, if someone picks up a crab and then goes and prepares it for processing to be put on the plate, you're not going to be picking up a crab and then dropping it, and picking up a crab and dropping it. The unnecessary, and that's our argument here, the unnecessary harm that we are doing to the crabs in this machine, it just doesn't have to happen. You do not need to have the machine. The machine, the game is not part of the food processing for the animal to get from farm.
It exists for entertainment purposes.
Exactly. I think that's the only value it has, which is entertainment, and we don't think it's right to harm an animal for the sake of entertainment. If you talk about the live seafood industry, then yes, there are issues. I think that's clear. Anyone who knows about animal welfare, you look at what's happening in the live seafood industry, you identify issues. But we should be moving forward and trying to improve standards over time and improve the way we treat the animals in that industry, not going back.
Right.
And we feel this machine is just taking a step back.
I see. So it shouldn't be the case where we look at history and be like, oh, they've always done it this way, so we should also follow doing it this way, right? It shouldn't be going along.
Absolutely not. If you look at any animal industry, you can look at even the domestic animal scene in Singapore, dogs and cats. There's some things that have been happening for a while, and just because it is, doesn't mean we accept it. We look at it, we can understand where it's come from, we can understand why it happened. So if you look at, again, at live seafood, you can understand some of the history behind it. But I think, again, we should be moving and improving, moving forward all the time.
I see. Well, speaking of moving forward, yesterday the House of Seafood actually released an apology. They said that they did this to teach children about marine life, and they intended to encourage them to release the crabs back into the wild. What do you think of this?
So, from the start, we never felt that the restaurant was intentionally trying to harm the crabs. We appreciate them coming up and clarifying their point of view. We knew that they did not intend to harm the crabs. Unfortunately, the machine does.
Okay.
On the point of education, again, we appreciate the effort or the thought of wanting to educate the next generation. I think we all would agree, even in the animal welfare sector, that we want to have more education for the younger generation especially. But the machine just doesn't meet any educational goals that we would think is appropriate. If anything, actually it does the opposite. I think what it does is it tells children who play the game, who might play the game or see someone playing the game, that animals are here for our amusement, our entertainment. If they get hurt in the process, well, it doesn't matter. So I don't think that's an educational point of value that we want to bring forward to the next generation. So it doesn't help. I think there are other ways to educate the young, especially about marine life. Actually, there are many groups out there in Singapore doing good work in this area. So I think maybe we can sort of look at some of what they are doing. They do the education without harming animals, and I would suggest the restaurant look at some of those methods as well.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming down to share more with us and coming all the way down to SPH to talk to us about this very important topic. And for more on this story, do head down to our website, that's straitstimes.com. And thanks for watching The Big Story today. If you'd like more news and videos, do head on to our website, that's straitstimes.com. Once again, this is Kimberly Jiao. We'll see you on Monday.